A 5-3 vote, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a strict Texas abortion law. It's been called the most significant ruling on abortion in a generation, some 20 years. The law required abortion clinics to meet the same building standards as surgical centers. Plus, it required doctors who perform the procedure to have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. Joining me talk about all of this and the impact of today's decision is our criminal defense attorney and legal analyst, I should say, though we are going to get into politics a little bit here. Pate. So always good to see you and hear your perspective. So it is a big deal. Everybody is talking about. So tell us why.
Well, I was surprised that the court went as far as it did. I mean, we knew that there were 4 justices who would want to strike this law down, and those justices have felt that way for a long time. But at oral argument here, Justice Kennedy was kind of on the fence, and no one knew which direction he would go in. But obviously he joined with the more liberal justices, and that meant 5 votes to strike down the Texas law, and that's what happened. Yeah, so it did not break even, as we saw happen on the case of the immigration reform, and President Obama's executive order there. So this was a big win for those who are anti-abortion, those who say, you know, they want to protect women's health. But Justice Breyer wrote in his favoring opinion that it was requiring an undue burden for women and did not meet that standard. So if this had been allowed, if it had been upheld, what would that have meant? Oh, I'm certain then we would see several other states come forward with similar regulations requiring all these health standards to be improved. And while that's an important state interest, and the court recognized that, they just found that this particular law in Texas really didn't do that. And it was just a guise to try to limit the number of abortion clinics that could operate. And many said that it was unfairly applied. Yeah, and that was a strong reason as well to strike it down. All right, so now it has been struck down. So there are 12 other states in the union that have similar laws, not this restrictive, but similar laws. So what happens now for them? Well, any law is now going to be judged on the same standard. Does it place a substantial burden to someone who's trying to seek an abortion? Because we know from Roe versus Wade, the Casey case, for many, many years, abortion is constitutional in the United States. You can have some restrictions, but if those restrictions impose a substantial burden, and the court's going to read that pretty strictly after this case, then those laws are struck down. All right, so is it fair to say we're going to see a domino effect in I think so. If there are any laws similar to Texas, those laws are gone. Now, Georgia's different. Georgia does not have a law like Texas, but Georgia does have a law that went from 24 weeks to 20 weeks, and that law is currently being challenged. It's different from Texas, but I think this Supreme Court decision could help the people that are challenging that law in Georgia. Very quickly, got to ask you, how is this going to affect the presidential race? Well, not as much as it would have if they had upheld the law, because then we would have had a 4-4 split. Everyone would have placed a lot of emphasis on which justice is going to come in and who's going to turn the tide. But I'm sure abortion is still going to be a hot issue. It's going to be discussed during the campaign. But we've got 5 justices now in the Supreme Court, though, that I do not think will allow any more abortion restrictions than we're currently seeing now. So a big issue, but not as big as it could have been. Yeah, and certainly not as big as the immigration issue, which was a even 4-4 split.
Yeah, absolutely. Paige, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Jeff?